How to counter every single Hydra head for the clan boss. Let's get it. What up team, it's your boy MurderInc here, back again with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today we're going to be going over how to counter all of the heads for this week. I mean, maybe next week, who knows, but what it really comes down to if you want to maximize your key damage is the amount of health you will have for the first 4 heads is going to be good enough to get a pretty decent key. Now, of course, you want to kill the heads, get a ton of decapitated damage in, but if you want the simplistic version, we're going to go over the first 4 heads, then we will talk about the second heads after. They're not as big of a deal, they're pretty easy to counter, but the first 4 is going to suffice for now. Using this, I'm not going to give any examples of champions to use, anything like that. We're simply going to go over the basics of how to counter each and every single head. Then you can look at your specific roster, because there's going to be thousands of people watching with tons of different rosters here. And then from there, you can use whatever you need. So let's talk about the infamous Head of Torment. How do you counter this guy? Run single target champions and don't hit it. Which, I mean, is terrible, I know, but you can get away with it, and outside of using your cooldowns, you can use some of your A1 abilities and hit this head, deal with the fear that does come along with this, and you will be fine. Outside of that, perfect veil buffs we all know are very strong. You can use damage dealing champions, and okay, so I lied. Yannica, perfect example, damage dealing champion, she applies veil on herself. Ninja does the same exact thing. Inquisitor Shamael, we all know about it, he can instantly cleanse the fear. Or you can use somebody like a Doom Priest or anyone else to cleanse those fears as well. However, once again, keep in mind you cannot block the fear from being applied to you. So you don't want to be running Deterrence or the Counterattack Mastery or Lydia unless you have a way to cleanse the fear from the champion if they are going to counterattack. Outside of that, this head hits hard, okay? Let's just get that straight. After doing all the testing, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I could be wrong, I don't have the multipliers for this skill here. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Head of Torment is the second hardest hitting head out of every single head available. So keep this in mind. Attack down is going to be beneficial here, but you don't need it as long as you don't get chained over and over pretty bad with his true fear, which can be RNG, of course. So his other skills, it doesn't really matter. Damage increases for each debuff an enemy is under. Ideally, you shouldn't be under a ton of debuffs unless maybe the Head of Blight is active, then you have all of the poisons on you. That you should definitely be worried about, but that's kind of a interaction between 2 of them, and we can definitely go over that. Outside of that, an annoying fear, true fear, pretty easy to counter. I say easy, I know you need champions for this, but there are methods to work around this for sure. Next, we have the Head of Decay. In my opinion, this is the most annoying head out of all 6 currently available to us. This guy, he has this ability, Speed of Decay, just cleansing everything, then filling the turn meters of all the heads by 30%. Then he has this life barrier, and this is where a lot of players struggle with. The Rotten Ward, while it's annoying as it is that it removes all the debuffs from a single head, this can be terrible, because if this goes on to the wrong head, you're going to be facing a wipe condition. And another thing to consider is its lowest total HP, which can sound good in theory, but based on how the defense kind of works out between all the heads here, it's not that ideal. So the best way I found to counter this head specifically, and as well as Head of Mischief, is don't run champions if you can that attack randomly. So attack 4 times at random. I don't think I have any champions here that do that. Looking really quickly, no, this is just a tanky team so I can read the skills here. So the perfect example of this is going to be Ninja. Now, Ninja is arguably one of the best champions for the Hydra, but the A2 can be so problematic, and this is part of the RNG that I talked about in the last video about you should definitely go check that out. It has a lot of really good points about the design flaw in the Hydra. Ninja's really good, but if you get too many hits onto the Head of Mischief, you don't want the Rotten Ward to ever be going on the head of Mischief. Murder, why wouldn't I want that? Because if he consumes one of your marked targets, how you doing? You just got your Hex removed if you had Hex in total. If you were saving Hex, you have to be weaving in between a 4-turn cooldown and a 5-turn cooldown, which is terrible because you have to hold off for one turn here. He uses this first, then you have 3 turns. The next turn is going to use this, and you have 2 turns of Hex. If you have to wait all that time, that's assuming your champion's going to go right away, and it's just a mess. So I really don't like this mechanic. You can use it to your advantage though. If you target with single target, and this is why you want single target champions, the head of Decay, make sure that shield's going back onto himself, making him stun himself, or if the fear is really proving problematic to you, just sacrifice going through having your champions get feared. Make sure that life barrier, rotten ward, life barrier does go onto the head of Torment, and then stun it. It will buy you at least 1 turn there. So this guy's really annoying for sure. This, not a huge deal, places a heal reduction debuff. You can just cleanse that, or you don't have to worry about that at all. Next to the head of suffering. Head of suffering, in my opinion, is the easiest head overall to have to deal with. He plays as a weaken. You can counter this by having strengthen. If you don't have strengthen, you're fine. I don't know. If you're building your champions to where they get 1 shot with a weaken on them, you're under gearing your champion significantly. I've never had that happen with this before, and usually you want your champions to be fast enough where you're not just getting lapped. Now, weaken with the head of Torment, or more so the head of Wrath after that, as the hardest hitting Hydra head can be problematic, but overall, not a huge thing. Use strengthen to make sure your champions are fast enough. Cannot be resisted, but it can be cleansed. So that's the good news with the head of suffering here. Outside of this, ally protection and reflect damage also provoke on the target with the highest amount of crit damage. This is actually a good skill in the player's benefit. So if you want to kind of avoid this marked mechanic, which is definitely a very annoying mechanic, you can have your marked champion hit the head of suffering, which is most likely going to be the head to survive the longest because his stats are completely busted with health, defense, all of that good stuff at any single difficulty. Have them kill themselves with reflect damage. It's going to reset the mark on a new target, and rinse and repeat. This is a 4-turn cooldown, but he does have an extra turn, which is, I believe, here, which is Pain Link, so it's more likely going to be a 3-turn cooldown. That's the good news here. As far as the provoke goes, you can run block debuffs, but you have to worry about Head of Mischief stealing it. Honestly, having the 1-turn provoke isn't the worst thing that you could run into here. And the ally protection could also be a problem if a champion of yours does get consumed and you don't have a debuff strip to your advantage. Now, you will want someone that can cleanse debuffs from the target. Now, you might be thinking, why would you want that? You just said use reflect damage to your advantage. But the problem with that is ally protection can be huge, and you don't want to be killing everyone on your team, just the marked target. So ideally, when no one is devoured, ally protection works well because it's a lot of damage being spread out amongst all of the champions. Yes, they're taking a little bit less, but a lot of that damage is being funneled into the Head of Suffering, guaranteeing you kill it much faster than you would have before. If you did instantly cleanse it and you didn't care about the reflect damage, like I said before, this guy's going to be around probably for the entirety of your key with no chance of killing it. You do want to decapitate this head if possible, because I believe this is one of the few champions, let me see. Yes, this is one of the few champions that stays decapitated for 2 turns with an incredibly slow base speed. If you can get this head decapitated with decreased speed on it, you are going to be doing massive, massive damage. So that should be one of the main goals for you. Now, yes, there's decapitation effects for all of the champions. They're not that big in my opinion here. For example, the Head of Decay here, once it is decapitated, you gain back some of your max HP that has been reduced. That is part of the healing mechanic I did mention. You don't really have to worry about that. it's not going to do enough. I believe it's like 75% of your total health. It's not going to be enough to wipe you. If it is, you definitely have to gear a little bit better on your champions. This one, in my opinion, is the most underwhelming and pretty much useless one. It removes all the fears and places Perfect Veil on 2 random champions of yours, which doesn't mean anything because once you kill this guy, you don't need Perfect Veil anymore. So why they put this there, I have no idea. And then finally, this one gives you a shield for 30% of your max HP. Whenever this head's killed, this can be good in tandem with the Head of Wrath. Now it's going to be very hard to kill this guy in sync with the Head of Wrath, so keep that in mind. This is kind of just like an added bonus. Now, that's going to conclude it for this. Pain Link, it's kind of like a reverse ally protection. It's like yeah, I don't know. It's like putting ally protection on your enemies so they take damage whenever you take damage. Honestly, you could use this the same way on a marked target, but that would be very hard to get the RNG to have the Pain Link placed on the target that is marked. As far as that, you can either just cleanse this debuff or have your champions ignore the Head of Suffering for that moment. He takes basically no damage as it is, so it's going to be very difficult unless you have like a Royal Guard, Husk, Septimus, any champion like that that does enemy max health. If you use that, you're probably going to kill the champion that it's on, so keep that in mind when fighting this. Outside of that, it has this increased resistance, so if you've ever been curious as to why this guy's resisting more than the others, this is going to be why. Outside of that, we have reduced AoE damage. Next week, I believe, is the new season of the Hydra, which means the Head of Suffering isn't going to be in this. This is going to open up a brand new door to so many new strategies, because look at this right here. Decrease the damage all Hydras take from area of effect attacks by 30%. 30%. So that's what we have on top of everything going on as of right now. Next week, I believe next week, because this should be the last set of this rotation, this guy isn't in the starting 4. So AoE champions are going to be 30% better damage-wise, more damage, killing the heads quicker, so on and so forth. I'm really hyped for next week for sure. Next, the Head of Mischief. Now, this champion specifically has been causing many players problems. Now, this is one of the first heads that I did a guide on to kind of walk people through the easiest way I found to counter it, which was build a champion that applies singular buffs on themselves. Build them with enough resistance to whatever difficulty you're doing, make them slow, or make it so they can sustain the buffs on themselves, and you never have to worry about Head of Mischief again. Krisk, very good champion to use this on. Vogoth, very good champion. Mortu Macabre, also a very good champion. He does gain turn meter, but the fact that he can proc peril from this gives you an added bonus there. And of course, Vogoth, when he's hit, he's going to heal, so that works as well. So there are many options for champions you can use to pretty much take the Head of Mischief out of the fight, except for when you get 3%. When you get 3%, he's going to take any buffs you have on you. They're probably going to be very good buffs because it requires good buffs to survive through a lot of mechanics. Like imagine if, let me just cycle through this really quick. Okay. Let's just take a look at this for a second. Krisk has 2 shields, block debuffs, increased attack, perfect veil, and 2 different buff stacks of continuous heal. Imagine, for just a moment, for just one moment, imagine, you know what, let's make it even better. Increase speed, increase defense. If I get 3% by this Head of Mischief, and then he spreads the buffs, and let's say the champion I'm using to buff strip is on cooldown, GG, I could be 25 minutes into the fight and it's over. So that's the unfortunate part about the strategy. There should be ways to kind of counteract that just in case it happens, like maybe there's a delay of 1 turn cooldown. That would be very nice. But on top of that, we also have turn meter stealing. That's not a huge deal. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why you can't speed tune a team per se. You can kind of speed tune, but it's a very complex matter there. So outside of that, there's not a whole lot to worry about with this, because you can counter it pretty easily. But we have this passive here that's rather annoying, decreases the damage all heads take from AoE. That we already know, but 75% chance of redirecting an enemy attack onto another random head unless it's under Hex. Now, this is one of the reasons why it's terrible to have Head of Decay with Head of Mischief. If you didn't have Head of Decay, and I believe next week it's going to be Head of Mischief without Head of Decay. That's going to be the case. Hex is going to be very, very strong because no one's going to be removing it from any of the Hydra heads. Yes, they can outspeed it. Of course, that's going to be a viable thing, but we can use Hex. We can single target down this Head of Mischief here and completely get him out of the way. One thing I do like is this decapitation effect. If somehow through time we can figure out a really good strategy for this, ideally you want to decapitate this guy last. Now that's going to be contrary to what I just said about burning him down, so why would we want to do that? Because he's so easy to counter with one champion for one, and secondly, if you have decapitated heads, and then we decapitate the Head of Mischief, we can extend that decapitation process significantly, getting massive damage onto all of these, especially Head of Suffering. It would be very hard to kill Head of Suffering first, have this 2 turns, wait for the turn meter to fill up, then kill the Head of Mischief here. If you can get it done, like I said, you will be doing absurd damage, millions of damage, because you're resetting the cooldowns of all of these. So these are synergies that we have to keep in mind when going to the Hydra and how we can counter things better. So we covered the main 4 here as of right now. There are a few other passive effects I didn't go over, but they're not that controversial here in my opinion. Decrease the damage taken of poison. Enemy max HP, of course, is scaled, decreases damage taken from poison. If you're running a poisoner, you're going to run a poisoner anyways, not just because of this. Now we have the Head of Blight and the Head of Wrath. Head of Wrath, the way to counter that, be tanky, have someone that can strip buffs from your opponent, because once he hits 15 stacks, he gets a stack every time he's hit once. He's going to, you'll see a counter in game. I would go through this, but it would be too much effort to cycle all the way through to find both of these heads RNG once again. So as far as this, attack down does help. You want to get rid of attack up as much as you can, but having a champion like Duchess or any other champion that reduces AoE damage you take, Stalwart set works, Strengthen works very well, increased defense of course is going to work. If you can build your champions properly, you will never suffer from wiping to this ability. I've done quite a few keys now, and I haven't personally gotten one shot when I built the team properly to the Head of Wrath. Even if he does have increased attack on him, one way to counteract that is use someone with an ally protect, have them apply ally protect for when that vengeance does in fact go off. That champion's going to instantly die, but your team will be safe, especially revivers who should have decent HP on. So that's the only real mechanic I would kind of worry about here. He does have an AoE where he provokes champions. I mean, that's annoying for sure. Block debuffs is going to cover that. Head of Blight, this guy is something else. So the Head of Blight is going to apply a poison cloud buff on everybody, and if you don't have HP burn, it's going to consider all of your attacks weak hits for 2 turns. This is a major wipe condition if you don't have HP burn on your targets, and if Head of Decay is paired up with the Head of Blight, I mean, I personally have no idea how that's going to be countered, because I don't know, you can only control the speeds and the turn meters of the Hydra head so much to a point, and eventually it's going to desync and just be the worst thing ever. So that's that. There should be more ways to counter it, but to my knowledge there is no way. So Head of Decay plus Head of Blight, terrible combination, which is why I think Head of Decay personally is the most annoying and the worst head overall. You guys can give me your thoughts on that for sure. Now outside of that, he has another ability that applies tons of poisons onto your champions and deals instant damage to you if you have those poisons remaining on further turns. You want to cleanse or you want a transfer, that would be nice. If you can use someone like a Sanguinia to transfer poisons back to the targets. But if it's going to be a weak hit, does it really matter? Answer being no, of course. So that's going to be the rundown of all 6 heads. Hopefully this guide helps a lot of players out. just kind of going over in depth since I've been testing a lot, kind of learning the nuances of all of the champions. And with what I just said here, you should be able to look at your roster now, pick out the champions you need to make a solid team happen. Don't try to counter all 6 heads. Once again, I mentioned that in the last video. It's going to be borderline impossible with my current knowledge here, not everyone in general, but the knowledge that I personally have to counter every single head. So with that being said, that's going to conclude this video. Give me your thoughts, give me your feedback. This is kind of, if you want to give feedback about what's wrong with the Hydra, check out my last video. I went over that. That's going to be going to Plarium. For this, I do look forward to seeing some strategies you guys will have coming forward to the Hydra in the next upcoming rotation. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm excited personally to go after that. So I will see you all next time. Don't forget, if you enjoy this content, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you all in the next video.